Hello everybody and welcome back once again. Today I just wanted to talk about the next weapon that I wanted to go over from Salvation's Edge, which is the Critical Anomaly Sniper Rifle. This has quick become one of my favorite special weapons to use, and it's really similar to some old favorites while having some new perks that I also think help shake things up a little and creates a really interesting sniper that I do think is worth going for, even if you have some of the previous favorites like Succession. We're going to go over some perks, how I've crafted two different roles that I think are great for different things. And yeah, before we begin, if you liked the video, found it helpful, like and subscribe, always very, very helpful. Twitch is also linked down below if you ever want to catch live streams. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So the basics for Critical Anomaly are that it is a 72 RPM stasis sniper. Now, the one thing that I think is important to note is that in the Final Shape sandbox update, kinetic special weapons lost their free damage bonus that they had compared to their stasis and strand counterparts, which basically means any kinetic slot special weapon has now had its damage normalized. So there's no more 15% kinetic weapon damage bonus that needs to be factored in. And that's actually a point in favor of Critical Anomaly, because under the old system, something like Succession, which is the same archetype, would do more damage just by virtue of being kinetic. But now Critical Anomaly and other things like Volta Bracket from Neomuna, which are strand and stasis, no longer have that disadvantage of not having the damage bonus. The other basic thing that I really like about Critical Anomaly before getting into perks and other things like that is the scope that's on it. All the raid weapons are like this, but it kind of matters more to me on a sniper. The reticle is an actual crosshair, which is something surprisingly rare in Destiny. It's not a dot or a diamond, it is a crosshair, which I personally really like because it's not quite as obstructive of your picture when you zoom in with the scope. I know it's a very minor thing, but given that it does have that, I think I should mention it. It's also personal preference, but for me, I like the crosshairs on these weapons a lot more than a lot of the other reticles we have on weapons in Destiny, so I give it a little bit of credit for that. And yeah, since that's all the general stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and just look at perks. So there's two roles that I really like. There's one that's a lot more basic, and then one that's a little more unique that we'll talk about later. I want to start with the basic one first. So it's no secret, Critical Anomaly is very, very similar to Succession, the sniper rifle from Deepstone Crypt, and then later there's a version that is available from the Brave Arsenal. Typically, a lot of those are run with either Reconstruction Vorpal or Reconstruction Firing Line, which are just really, really good combos for a sniper like that. Now, Succession and other 72 RPMs currently are not really used for damage output in PvE. They're used for a lot of times breaking weak points on bosses, things like that. Obviously, Whisper of the Worm can be an exception where it is used for bosses like Oryx. But in general, they're great because they do a lot of damage pretty quickly, great for things like Tormentor weak points, boss weak points, things like that. This is also part of why I don't personally recommend Bait and Switch on it. Bait and Switch already is not my favorite perk for special weapons, just given how it activates. And as a result, I also just don't like it very much on Critical Anomaly. I really do prefer just doing something like Firing Line that is much simpler. And because Bait and Switch will activate on both weapons, if you were also use a Bait and Switch heavy, you wouldn't really be able to make use of two Bait and Switch weapons at once. Bait and Switch is a great perk, but if I were to use it, I'd much rather use it on my heavy weapon than my special. So for the first roll on Critical Anomaly, I went with basically the Succession roll, and I did Reconstruction Firing Line, and I basically use it like it's a Succession. The main reason I think that it has going over Succession here is actually the fact that it is stasis. So no longer does Succession just beat it by virtue of being kinetic. If Critical Anomaly is a stasis weapon, you can run it with a stasis heavy weapon and double up on mods that are based on the weapon damage type. Things like scavenger mods, things like loader mods if you use them, things like that all over. I just think Critical Anomaly does actually get an advantage because it's stasis. So if you use a stasis heavy weapon, whichever that may be, you can get the bonus of being able to double dip on your mods, surges, scavengers, whatever. Normally, with a sniper rifle video, I would give a breakdown of boss DPS testing, but I don't think that's really worth looking at specifically for Critical Anomaly, because while it is technically a sniper that could be used for boss damage, it has about basically the same rules as Succession. You do have Chaos Reshaped, which could let you get up to a 35% damage buff, but no one is already using Succession for boss DPS output currently, so there's not really a reason you would switch to using Critical Anomaly for that. If you were to use a special weapon to do damage to bosses right now, Still Hunt is significantly better regardless of your class. It's amazing if you're a hunter, and it's really, really good even for Titans and Warlocks. And then if you're a Warlock, you might be using Euphony instead, which also beats Succession and Critical Anomaly very, very, very easily. So there's not a whole lot of reason that you should care about the like DPS values and stuff of a sniper like this against bosses specifically. They're just much better special weapons at the moment, so I don't really want to waste your time with that. Even if you were using a legendary sniper for damage output currently, something like Supremacy is just better than something like Succession or Critical Anomaly in terms of DPS, total damage, things like that. So it really isn't worth discussing the damage output against bosses for this. It's much more of a utility sniper in that it does high crit damage really quickly. So again, things like boss weak points, Tormentor shoulders, things like that, really, really good. Boss damage output, total damage, DPS kind of thing, not quite so much. Now, the other role that I wanted to look at, though, I think is significantly more interesting, and that one is actually going to be Chill Clip. And then I put Chaos Reshaped on it, but there are other perks, too, that we'll talk about. But I still think Chaos Reshaped is the best second for this role, and I'll explain that in a minute. The main one I want to highlight here is Chill Clip. So this role specifically I've been using in this week's Grandmaster, which is Glassway, and has Overload champions. Well, Chill Clip makes the top half of your magazine apply a slow to the main target hit and then other targets around that target. This will obviously stun Overload champions, and while there are plenty of other weapons that have Chill Clip that have been used for Overload champions, like Riptide, some other fusions that have Chill Clip, and even sometimes Lingering Dread, the grenade launcher, this is like the only weapon in the game that fires instantaneously with no charge up, no projectile travel, anything like that that has Chill Clip. So what that ends up doing for you is making this one of the fastest ways to stun an Overload champion. And yes, it is a sniper, and overloads are not always the easiest to hit with a sniper, but you don't need a crit. You can hit a body shot on the overload to stun it, and then once it's stunned, you could use the sniper to get a little bit more damage, or you could even fire a second shot to freeze it, which would stun an unstoppable champion too, because a 72 RPM sniper only needs 2 shots to fully freeze a champion, unlike something like a Riptide, which has a higher fire rate and needs 3. This results in Critical Anomaly being very, very fast to stun overloads or freeze them at the same time. It's super, super useful for that, and that's why I really like Chill Clip on it. It was super useful in this GM, and also having a sniper in GMs is just something I like for a lot of the different strikes that we have as GMs, because sometimes there'll be sniper enemies that are really, really dangerous. Like in the Radiolarian pool section of Glassway, the sniper vandals can be very annoying. If you have one player that's able to snipe back with a sniper rifle, it's great, but if there's no sniper rifle artifact mod, they can feel a little rough to use. And with Critical Anomaly, you're able to use Chill Clip, which you could then have to stun overloads and also deal with sniper tier enemies without having to worry about them being able to kill you back, since it'll one-tap them with a headshot. That does leave a second perk in question, though, which there's several options. Naturally, I think for a GM role, somebody might be willing to lean towards something like Explosive Payload. The thing is, Explosive Payload in PvE is very weird, because a lot of times it is touted as just being a flat damage buff, which is really, really good on primary weapons, but it does get a little iffy when we're talking about snipers. See, the thing with Explosive Payload is it has a weird interaction with crit damage, where it does its bonus based on the crit modifier, and it basically ends up giving very small bonuses for snipers in PvE. And I did test whether or not the explosion counted as a second hit for Chill Clip, because it does count as a second hit for rewind rounds, which is also available on this sniper. However, that obviously with the damage modifier that you end up getting doesn't make it worth using for damage output, so we ignored that role in this video. Rewind and Explosive Payload just didn't seem to put out that much damage. But it only counts as one hit for Chill Clip as well with Explosive, so it won't even instant freeze anything. So I did pass up on Explosive Payload. I'll put the damage values that it gives on screen here, because it was really, really low when you actually hit a crit, because it ends up taking some of the damage from your crit multiplier. It's really weird. There's a lot of math behind it. That's not important at the moment. I ended up just going with Chaos Reshaped for the role that I was using for Nightfalls, because Firing line can be a little trickier in something like a Nightfall since you do need both your teammates next to you at all times, whereas firing line is really easy to use in a raid where there's 6 people, and a GM where there's only 3, it's not as easy to use. On top of that, Chaos Reshaped at 1 stack still gives you 20%, which is the same amount as firing line, and in GMs, you're going to be in combat a lot more, so getting Chaos Reshaped up to the 35% is possible, and that just gives you a little bit more damage with which to work against champions, so I really liked having Chaos Reshaped on it. There's not really a great second option perk here. You're mainly using the sniper for chill clip, but Chaos Reshaped did the most for you while having the least drawbacks of, you know, just requiring you to be in combat, which isn't that hard to do in a GM anyway. So I really liked the chill clip Chaos Reshaped role. I used that one a lot more than the other one I crafted, which was Reconstruction Firing Line. But in conclusion, I think the Reconstruction Firing Line role is great if you either A, don't have Succession, or B, want something that can surge match a stasis weapon. And then I really liked Chill Clip with Chaos Reshaped for Nightfalls. And I did test several things with Explosive Payload, hoping to make its wacky interactions with other perks work, but none of them really made it worth it. Explosive Payload on this sniper in PvE specifically is a little bit of a gimmick to me. Unless we get an artifact mod in the future, of course, that makes it worth something, or there's some weird interaction that I wasn't able to test here, but it did seem like Explosive Payload wasn't worth it. It didn't even really get its own section in this video. I just want to go ahead and let you know that at least from my testing, it seemed like it was not the move. But that brings us to the very end of the video, so if you liked it or found it helpful, like and subscribe, greatly appreciated. If you got a different role that I didn't cover here, mention it down in the comments below. If I missed something with Explosive Payload, maybe, I'd like to hear it in the comments as well. The other thing is the next video, I'm looking at some different setups for Euphony, because I got that to drop this week, so if you want to see that, subscribe so you can see when that goes live. But other than that, thank you so much for watching and making it this far. I will see you all in the next one. Later, everybody.